Welcome to the first ever episode of Neil and I's Home Cinema, the podcast where we watch films together. In this series, we invite cinema experts to sit down and curate and present a series of films centred around a theme. This theme could be anything from silent films to the Western to the work of Wes Anderson. And each episode will focus on one film, and each series will be 4 to 6 episodes long. And hopefully you see something you've not seen before, and hopefully you learn something new along the way as well. I'm Calum and Euan. Today we're talking about Close Encounters of the Third Kind, the first in Euan Foley's series from Waterpiece, Aliens in the Last 50 Years of Cinema. Warning, the following discussion will contain spoilers. 15 years after John F. Kennedy said,
"We choose to go to the moon,"
and 8 years after humankind first succeeded in doing so, Steven Spielberg's classic Close Encounters of the Third Kind was released to the public. It's a tale of epic blockbuster proportions, but it begins in a small Midwestern American town with family man and electrical lineman Roy Neary. When out to repair a downed power line, Roy has an encounter with a UFO. An experience shared by fellow local Gillian. After Gillian's son is abducted and Roy's family leave him, the two both become obsessed by this subliminal image of a mountain that leads them both to Devil's Tower in Wyoming, which the government has come to anticipate as the UFO landing site. In an attempt to restrict access to Devil's Tower, false information has been spread that there is a toxic gas leak nearby. Undeterred, Roy and Gillian proceed to the mountain and wait in suspense for what will come, as UFOs swirl and descend on the site. The humans first initiate contact by playing a 5-note musical sequence that was previously communicated by the aliens. And the response results in a beautiful symphony, leaving all the spectators struck in awe. When the alien ship eventually falls silent, bright light beams as the ship doors fall open, releasing the abductees and revealing green-grey creatures intriguingly diverse in shape and size. Roy looks back, but enters the ship knowingly and leaves the world behind.
Sci-fi has always been my favourite genre of film.
I'm talking to Euan Foley, founder and editor of film and TV outlet Rat Party Media.
My favourite film is also Close Encounters, and that kind of really neatly bookmarks the first of like a big moment in cinema when that science fiction really came into like the sort of public domain and everyone would watch these sort of films. It's nearly getting on for 50 years old. But that to me, that is kind of the start of a big sort of generation of massive alien films and really engaging with different topics about what alien films can explore, because it's essentially a blank canvas because we don't know anything about it. So any director, any screenwriter, anyone, you can be as creative as you like. You can really basically import any ideas into it as long as it's with it. In fact, it doesn't even have to be within reason. As long as it works, it works.
Ronnie, I need you to see something with me. It's really important.
Okay, all right. What about the kids?
What? Oh, the kids. I'll get the kids.
Sylvia, come on. We're going on a little adventure.
Ellie, Brad, come on. Get up, both. Come on. It's better than goofy golf. Come on.
It's very interesting that this film has a very peaceful and quite innocent, and also people are just, it's just that, what you're saying, that sheer kind of like fascination with
wonder, yeah.
Exactly.
I think that's ultimately what Spielberg does and how the film sits. But there are a few times when he does come away from that, particularly with the scene when the Barry, the young boy, is abducted. I mean, that scene, that little set piece, that's straight out of a horror film. Every possible way in which their family home can be entered or broken into, that's exactly what's happening. The lights are off, the Hoover's going berserk, all the heating's on, the lights are flashing, they're coming up through the vents. The chimney is like it's so invasive, and up until that point in the film, it's so it's pretty peaceful. It's fairly ambiguous, but at that point in the film, you think, wait a minute, this might not be quite as peaceful as I'm thinking up till now. It's almost like misdirection to try and make you think about the possibilities of what could happen between that point and the end of the film. And obviously things take a totally different turn. But I think for the sake of cinema, I think it opens the film up massively, because in that, like yourself, the first time you've seen it, in that sort of window of time between Barry being abducted and the end of the film, you don't know what the hell's going to happen. And I think that's the second time, third time around, whatever, that scene becomes less significant, I think. But the first time round, I think that's an important sort of marker in the film, because it shows you that this could go either way.
It almost creates the sense of wonderment, or gives you that same feeling that the people there must have, where you just have no idea, unless you've seen the film, whether they're peaceful or warmongering.
Because the genre has stereotyped that we're all going to die, we're going to get blown up. But I think it's the fact that it's in Ohio, it's in Indiana, and it's in Wyoming. Mm-hmm. And if you're thinking, like, of all the 50 states, which ones am I going on holiday on? They're like rock bottom. This is the US that no one knows outside of the people that live there, and I think that's very deliberate in the fact that it's like a blank canvas but also at the same time it's very of the norm. It's just what people do. It's everyday people.
Out of the northwest. Jimmy, come here.
Film really gives you, that we've said quite a few times now, this feeling of awe and wonder. But I think, and I know you talked about in your article, the Williams score and the sort of 5-tone motif are like really important for...
There aren't many films where you choose just this tiny little snippet of music, and it's so important not only to the sound of the film but to the actual workings of the film. I mean, most films have like a strong theme, particularly John Williams' stuff, there are other themes in it, but it's this tiny little 5-tone snippet that's so important to the film. But it's so basic, but also I think that's why it works so well, because if it was a really complex piece of music or theme or anything like that, then that does not work as a form of communication. It has to be basic, and it has to be something simple that we can instantly recognise. Any other film, and aliens and humans meet, and information is shared, or blood is shed, or something like that. Whereas this, it's just about, it's almost like acknowledging each other in the only way we know how, which is just through sound. So I think that's really, it's boiling it really down to its basics, but I think it works really well because of that.
And in that climactic scene with the contact, where they're playing that 5-tone, and then it's just this back and forth, and it's amazing, and there's something quite beautiful about it.
Yeah, it's one of these things that it's so universal. It's like, that scene itself is like a 10-15 minute sequence, and so there's almost no dialogue in it. It's just, you would never need to subtitle it. Like that film, you could show that sequence to anyone anywhere, and they know exactly that it's like this is communication, but because it's sound, it's not. It doesn't matter that if it was in English or anything else, it's contrived as to what it's saying and how that's translated and all that sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. But sound is universal everywhere, and it's just everyone everywhere can understand exactly what's happening, because there's nothing more to it than it's just communication via sound.
I'm no music technician, or I don't have like any sort of background in music, but I feel even the sort of like is quite it sort of encapsulates the feeling of peace or certainly
it's-
wonder.
I mean, you listen to like any John Williams, even like throughout that, there's plenty of like minor music in it, but that little motif it's really simple. It's all nice, like major happy notes. It's like it would be odd if that was the case and then it all went to guns blazing and stuff like that. So I think it's
strange.
It's almost the only way that you could do it, but I think it's just done so well that, you know, it's one of his most iconic scores, but it's not necessarily the film that people would rush to as, oh, of course that's John Williams, but it's because it's really part. I mean, scores are always part of a film, but that's part of the workings of the film. That film doesn't work without that happening. And I mean, I'm maybe another composer would have done something similar or something different, but what he's done is perfect.
Another important part of your article on the film is the whole visual effects of it.
Doug Trumbull is one of the guys for like special effects supervision, and he did 2001. Later on, did Blade Runner. He did this. He did Silent Running. So many classic, like science fiction films that for whatever reason he was the go-to guy, and there was no one else that seemed to be able to do it the way that he did things. The closing sequence is where that's the money shot. Literally the money, I think a lot of the money went. Making that look right and believable while still making it look like something you've never seen before. I think I'm right in saying that actually all of the special effects were added in like quite a while after shooting. I think they shot the film and then they superimposed it on and spliced it into the film and things like that. But all these actors are reacting to something that isn't even there. Which is when you watch the actual closing, the sequence at the end, it's bizarre how well it fits, because these guys are probably just looking at either a studio or the desert, but it's still really, you can see it in their faces in these big sort of panning shots of all these guys watching this absolutely massive ship land. You can see that they are so absolutely blown away by what's happening, and I think that's the sort of thing that Doug Trumbull will have absolutely nailed. That'll have been weeks and months and possibly even years of like deciding how exactly they were going to do that. And Carlo Rambaldi, he was the guy for certainly 60s, 70s, even into the 80s, and I think possibly even into the 90s as well. He did E.T., he did Alien, he did this. He's done kind of similar sort of like CV as Doug Trumbull. It's like all of the classics, any sort of like films of that time where you can think of a classic alien. He's probably the guy that did it, and it's not. He wasn't someone who. I don't think he was so much involved in the creative process, but I think the man could pretty much build anything if you showed him, if you gave him enough drawings, he can make it, sort of thing.
It's almost that feeling that you can imagine feeling yourself when you just something incredible happens. You know, if you see like the Northern Lights, or something like that.
I think I would take that even a step further. I think that's like, you know, obviously it's a very localized event, but it's like, you know, where you were when like these things happen. Like it's like the moon landing. It's like those people will never forget that. Everyone who saw the moon landing remembers where they were when they watched the moon landing. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a similar thing, that these people are all united by the fact that they were there when this crazy massive spaceship came and they had this interaction with these aliens. But I also think it's really interesting the fact that there's so many cameras there, and that's something that doesn't really go any further. But there's a scene when there must be like 15, 16 cameras all running, like just tape churning away, and like that means that everything that's happening is being documented. I would just love to know what happens to the world once that footage is released.
Sequel.
Yeah. I think I would riot if there was if they suddenly decided they were going to make a sequel to that. But that's my bit. Actually, Spielberg himself, he said that if he'd been a father by the time that he made this film, he would never have written that ending. And he maintains that. But Richard Dreyfuss recently on a podcast, he said that's nonsense. He said the film doesn't exist in any other form. He says Roy has to go on that ship. He says the film leads to Roy going on the ship. There's no other way it can happen.
That's all for today. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's podcast, you can read more about Close Encounters and the other films in Euan's series on our website, neoneye.co.uk. If you want to keep updated, you can follow us on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. And lastly, we do have an audio-only version of the podcast. Links for all of that in the description. Next week, we'll be talking about Ridley Scott's sci-fi classic Alien, so don't miss that. And we'll see you then.